Hello, this is Economic Competition, the Role of the Government, Section C, Economic Roles of the Government lecture. Our prioritized standard is Economic Standard 35. Objectively, we're going to identify some of the regulatory roles of the government over the economy. Establishing and implementing government policies and programs can actually be used to correct for market failures. So, of those market failures in the United States, laws and government regulations have been adopted to maintain competition, which are known as antitrust laws. If you don't know what a trust is a monopoly. So we have laws that can actually limit the formation of monopolies. One of those such laws, the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, which was used famously by Theodore Roosevelt in the early 1900s, made it illegal to create a monopoly or enter into a conspiracy to restrain trade. Now, I should point out that doesn't actually mean that all monopolies are illegal. It just means monopolies that are restraining trade are illegal ones, or conspiracies to try to restrain trade are illegal. Just monopolies in and of itself, not necessarily illegal. The government does allow some monopolies to exist. Also, we have the Clayton Antitrust Act of 1914. This did something the Sherman Act didn't do. It actually had penalties. It had a little more ability to enforce it because it gave a broader idea of what was meant by an illegal monopoly. The Clayton Act prohibited price discrimination, meaning you can't charge different people different prices for the same product. Tying contracts, you can't force people to buy one item to get another item they actually do want. You can't have interlocking directorates, which means you can't have people on a board of directors for two different businesses in the same industry. And it also prohibited mergers that lessen competition. You can't have mergers, but if the entire purpose of the merger is just to lessen competition, generally speaking, those can't go on without government approval. And another way we can protect against antitrust, against trust, is with the Federal Trade Commission, which is an independent agency that investigates private businesses engaging in unfair trade practices. So if the FTC actually determines that you are participating in unfair means of competition, they can actually issue cease and desist orders for your company, which means they can actually close your business down if they think you're doing underhanded or illegal things to hamper competition. Also, goods or services with externalities can either be encouraged or discouraged through government actions. So one of those things they can do is produce subsidies. And subsidies, these often encourage industries to produce positive externalities. If you don't know what a subsidy is, it's basically a big fat check from the government. And the government says, hey, we love what your business is doing. Here's some free money. Enjoy your free money. So generally speaking, if you just get money randomly from the government, that's going to encourage you to do more of the same. You're like, hey, maybe we'll get another money gift from the government. We'll just keep doing that. Also, taxation often discourages industries that produce negative externalities. So if you're producing what are considered demerit goods, as in things that don't merit or help society, you are usually taxed. So like if you are a cigarette producer, the government taxes you quite a bit because you're a cigarette producer. So that actually discourages them from producing cigarettes because they are taxed so much whenever they do in fact produce cigarettes. Public provision of information and statistical data can actually remedy inadequate information. So we actually have some parts of our government that have the job of giving us information. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, their job is to keep people informed of statistics that have to do with labor. That's pretty much all they do. The government has a few options for lessening resource immobility. So let's say you live in Michigan, the land that God hates, and you don't have a job because all the jobs that were in Michigan moved away either to Mexico or China or some other country where they don't have to pay the workers anything. So there are a few things the government can do to help people that have the misfortune of living in an area with not a lot of job opportunities. One thing they can do is relocation allowances, meaning they can essentially give you money to go move somewhere else. I hear there's all kinds of jobs in North Dakota, don't live in Michigan anymore. Another thing they can do is offer favorable tax treatment. So, hey, you chose to live in Michigan, sorry, we're not going to charge you as much in taxes this year. Sorry about your misfortune of living in Michigan. Another thing they can do is retraining programs. So if you do live in Michigan, they could actually give you training skills by giving you, again, some type of training in a different field. So if you're used to factory work, all that factory work is gone now, then we'll give you skills in something else now. Public policies aimed at correcting market failures are very costly activities in itself and are only economically justified when the expected benefits actually outweigh the cost. So economic analysis can actually help determine when market failures are actually going to be important enough to justify corrective actions by the government. Aside from correcting for market failures and providing public goods, the government additionally provides additional economic functions. For instance, the government establishes property rights and provides standard units of measures, weights, and also money. Property rights, what we mean by this, is the right to use, earn income from, and transfer a good, and then also the right to the enforcement of these rights that you have for property rights. So that's another thing that the government does for people. Also, property rights, these can be defined, enforced, and also limited by the government. So they can tell you more specifically about what your property is. They can enforce who owns property. They can also limit who can own property and what property can be owned. The government also redistributes income through transfer payments. So one way they can redistribute income is with social insurance programs. These types of programs pay benefits to retired and disabled workers, their families, and the unemployed, but only for those paying into such programs. So is this welfare? No, it's not actually welfare because you're paying into these programs. You have paid into Social Security, you have paid into Medicare, you pay into your unemployment insurance, you pay into your workers' compensation plans. All of these things are being paid into. So when you get your money out of these, you're not actually benefiting from welfare. You're just basically getting money that you already paid into in the first place. Public assistance programs, however, these pay benefits based on need, even if they have not paid into such programs. So is this welfare? Yes, this is horrible, evil welfare that provides horrible programs like food stamps that let people in the greatest country in the world not starve to death. Veterans benefits. Greatest country in the world actually provides help to our veterans. Temporary cash assistance for needy families, which basically helps people that don't have money so they don't have to be homeless because they live in the greatest country in the world. Medicaid, which in the great state of Tennessee is called TennCare, which doesn't let poor people not have health insurance just because they're poor. So, yeah, this is welfare. You could certainly probably make the argument that it does benefit our society that we are providing some of these things, though. The government also promotes full employment, stable prices, and reasonable rates of economic growth, which is sometimes known as stabilizing the economy. We'll have an entire unit where we talk nothing about this. We'll move on. Most government programs and functions are actually funded through different types of taxes, which are mandatory payments to the government. Different types of taxes actually affect different groups differently, with three main types of tax structures. One type is progressive taxes, which means as you make more money, you progressively pay a larger percentage of your income in taxes. We also have regressive taxes, which levy a higher tax, progressive taxes, if I didn't say, levy higher tax rates on high income groups, as where regressive taxes levy higher tax rates on lower income groups. So as you make more money with regressive taxes, you actually pay less and less and less and less taxes. And proportional taxes, these actually levy identical tax rates on all income groups. So like our income tax, federal income tax is actually progressive. As you make more money, you pay more. Property taxes that most people made are actually proportional. It's the same proportion regardless of how much property you own. And regressive taxes, that would be like Social Security. Once you make beyond a certain amount of money a year, you actually start paying less and less and less and less for Social Security taxes. So those are examples of all those. If the government does not bring in enough money through tax revenue, it's actually forced to borrow money from individuals, corporations, banks, foreign countries through what are called selling federal securities. We'll talk more about that in the future also. All right, that concludes economic competition and the role of the government. Section C, our prioritized standard was Economic Standard 35. Objectively, now you can identify some of the regulatory roles of the government over the economy.